1/3 of all murder cases in America remain open.
He had told me that if I opened my eyes, he would slit my throat.
Each one is called a cold case.
The DNA evidence taken from the victim was a match. The Linden rapist was at it again.
Based on the hit A&E television program.
A phone call is placed, one that changes a family's life forever.
Cold Case Files, the podcast.
You could see the fire in his eyes. He screamed at me, "You want it? Get your tape recorder out."
Get new episodes of Cold Case Files every Tuesday on Podcast One, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 250 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is up with you?
Well, good, man. What's up with you?
Struggling a little bit with back pain.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. Tried to pick something up, and the whole system went haywire back there. I think every muscle is fighting each other. And so
doesn't take much when you get up in this age.
It doesn't. I don't like it, but you're right. You're right about that. So episode 250, man.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. You put that together with True Crime All the Time. I think we just put out
270.
270. You want to do that math in your head?
Be 520.
520. Okay.
Yeah.
I just testing you.
Slap on the Patreon only episodes,
which we have 41 of. That's 561.
Yeah,
that's a lot of episodes, man. It really is, and I feel great about it.
That's a lot of true crime.
It's a lot of true crime. I hope we have 500, 1,000 more.
Yeah, same here.
So let's start out by giving our Patreon shout outs. We had Halima Lawaru.
Hey, Halima.
Melissa Lutt.
What's going on, Melissa?
Shannon Weaver.
Well, thank you, Shannon.
Darian Parno.
Hey, Parno.
Christina Brigitte.
Well, thank you, Brigitte.
Careza.
What's up, Careza?
Triona Coyne.
Triona.
Kara Firestone.
Hey, Kara.
Eileen Chason.
Hey, appreciate that, Eileen.
Casey Buck.
What's going on, Buck?
Colleen Scott.
Hey, Colleen.
Norma Winings.
Well, we got to have some whinings.
Rosemary.
What's up, Rose?
Carolyn Johnson.
Hey, Carolyn.
And last but not least, Allison Brown.
Hey, good old Allison.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Aaron White.
What's up, Aaron?
So we love all the people that choose to support us on Patreon, the people that continue to support us. We also had some great PayPal donations from Kelly Baker.
Hey, Kelly.
Kimberly Silva.
Thank you, Kimberly.
And Kelly Duncan.
Well, appreciate that, Kelly.
So thanks to everyone. It really means a lot to us. Speaking of T-Cat Gibbs, right now we have an episode out on Matthew Beck.
Yeah.
This is a workplace murder episode. You know, Beck was a guy who worked at the Connecticut Lottery. And, you know, over the years, he began to feel slighted.
Sure. Got frustrated.
He got frustrated. There were some mental health issues, I think, fused into this case, but he made the fateful decision to go in and murder 4 people. And, you know, essentially he had a hit list. He was looking for these 4 people.
Very focused.
Specifically. So make sure you check that episode out. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
Today we're talking about the murders of Pamela Buckley and James Freund, also known as the Sumter County Does. In the summer of 1976, the bodies of a young man and woman were found off the side of a secluded dirt road outside the town of Lynchburg in Sumter County, South Carolina. The victims had both been shot several times. Police did their best to determine how the pair had come to be in the area, who shot them, and why. Identification of the couple proved to be nearly impossible. Despite law enforcement releasing detailed descriptions of the victims nationwide, no one came forward with any information. The body sadly went unclaimed. investigators struggled to put the pieces of the puzzle together in what would soon become a cold case. I mean, Gibbs, we've seen this before.
We have.
Especially in Unsolved. When you can't even identify the victims, where do you go from there, right? How do you identify potential witnesses, let alone try to come up with suspects?
It's almost impossible. Got to have a starting point.
Yeah, you got to have a starting point. And normally that starting point is identifying the victims. Yeah. From there, you find out who their known associates are. If they're married, you find out all of those things, right? Friends and family, and then you interview and you kind of go from there. But if you don't have that starting point,
can't really backtrack.
And you can't move forward.
No.
At the same time. But there were two people who would not let this case go. One was the Sumter County coroner, who continued to try to find answers until she retired 33 years after the murders. The other was a member of the public, Matthew McDaniel, who was determined to get to the bottom of both the couple's identity and the identity of their killer. So this obviously went on for a very long time, and really just when it seemed as though the victims' identities would forever remain a mystery, there was a breakthrough. Matthew's research and persistence in pushing for genetic genealogy resulted in the testing on the couple's DNA. A staggering 44 years after the murders first made headlines, the testing was conducted and names were finally put to the victims' faces. Now, the killer or killers' identity or identities and the exact circumstances around the double murder remain unknown, but investigators have some persons of interest in their sights, and they're confident that it's not too late for those with information to come forward to help solve this case.
Well, it's never too late.
No, it really isn't. And I think it's one of the things about these unsolved cases, there's a need to talk about them. Now, is an episode that we do ever going to help solve it, help solve a case? I don't know that it is, but could it? Or could another podcast, someone listening to a podcast or seeing a Dateline or, seeing one of these shows, could it jog a memory? Or could it cause them to fully understand a memory that they have and that maybe it does pertain to this case and cause them to come forward and then, everything gets set into motion?
Yeah, it could.
All right, so let's dive headlong into this episode. It's 6:20 a.m. on the morning of August 9th, 1976. A truck driver driving through Sumter County between Interstate 95 and South Carolina 341 pulled over for a rest stop. When he got out of the truck, he saw two lifeless bodies lying face up on the side of the road. According to the Sumter Daily Item, the shocked driver jumped back into the truck and drove to a nearby store where he alerted the clerk, who immediately called the police. All right, so you're a trucker, and we have a lot of truckers.
We do.
Who listen to our podcast. You're kind of going along your day. You need to pull over. You need to rest. You need to use the facilities, whatever the case is. You get out of your truck and discover two dead bodies. Okay, it's going to be a different day for you.
Oh, yeah.
This is not a normal thing. And we talk about this from time to time. People who discover deceased individuals. Number one, that's going to be a tremendous shock.
Sure it will be.
I think the second piece of that is, how long does something like that stay with you? And maybe it stays with you forever to some degree.
Sure, it's probably going to vary with the person.
But I imagine it's something that's going to be a little difficult to get out of your mind.
Yeah. I wonder if that happens today, knowing how many people listen to true crime, would their little part of them kick into detective mode at that moment?
Well, and if not detective mode, maybe CSI mode.
Yeah.
In the form of maybe knowing what not to do.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to disturb maybe even footprints. I don't want to get too close. I don't want to walk through what could be a crime scene. I do think that's one thing that the CSIs and the true crime shows and the podcasts probably have really helped with. Your average, education of those things. Your average person today knows so much more about crime scenes and what should and should not occur.
Right.
You know, take a look at Dexter. I know Dexter was a killer, but he was also a CSI guy. And so, you know, watching things like that, whereas in the 1950s, let's say, you stumble upon a scene like that, you maybe rush headlong into it.
Sure, yeah.
And you're trying. Now, I'm not saying today you don't go over and see if the person's still alive.
Right.
I don't want it to seem as though I'm saying that. But there would be some discoveries where you know right off the bat. This person or these individuals are deceased. There's nothing you're going to be able to do for them. They've been deceased for some period of time. So I don't want to disturb tire marks. I don't want to disturb footprints. I don't want to maybe pick up fibers onto my shoes that are laying around the body. So I think that's a great point you're making.
Yeah.
It was determined that the pair had been dead less than 24 hours. The estimated time of death was between 11:30 p.m. to 12 a.m. the night before, around 7 hours before they were found. At the time, it was reported that the victims were shot in the chest, back, and throat with either a .38 caliber or a .357 Magnum revolver.
So what's the big difference between a .38 and a .357?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest difference is a .357 Magnum is a very, very powerful round.
Yeah.
Crime scene technicians set to work taking plaster casts of tire tracks in the vicinity of where the bodies were discovered. So, and we just talked about that, right? Those are important clues. If you can get a good plaster cast of a tire track, they've done amazing things with those.
Sure.
Narrowing it down to certain brands. Now, if you get, you know, some type of Goodyear where they sell millions and millions and millions, it may not help you as much.
But like Marissa Tomei said, and my cousin Vinny, you know, you can really narrow it down on those treads of the tires.
Sure.
Based on the type of axle and, you know, rear end of the car it had.
Whether it had posi track or it didn't have posi track.
Exactly.
But it goes back to the discussion we had. If you walk through that tire track, right, then what does it do?
It ruins it.
You're not going to be able to get a good cast, and you know, you could potentially destroy a very powerful piece of evidence. It was determined that the male victim was 6'1¼ inches tall, weighed about 150 pounds, and had an athletic build. That jumped out at me right away. You know, 6'1¼ 150. You know, that's lean.
It is lean.
So I see where that could be viewed as athletic, but it is very lean.
It is.
To be, you know, over 6'1" and only weigh 150 pounds. He had brown shoulder-length hair, brown eyes, and thick, dark eyebrows. He was estimated to be in his 20s and was white with an olive complexion. On his right shoulder were 2 scars. He also had a 4-inch scar on his abdomen, which indicated that he'd had an appendectomy. According to the Greenwood Index Journal, he wore faded blue Levi's, no underwear, and a red t-shirt. On the front of the t-shirt was a Coors Light beer logo, and on the back was a Camel Challenger GT Sebring 75 logo.
Sounds like a unique shirt.
It does. It also sounds like you've got racing involved. You got beer. Beer is often involved at races. A lot of people drink beer at races.
They do.
The website SumterMysteryCouple.com explains that the t-shirt most likely originated from the 1975 Sebring races in Florida, which Coors sponsored. So again, that makes a lot of sense. What wasn't clear was how the man acquired the t-shirt.
Yeah. Did he buy it at the races? Was he there? Did he attend the races, or did someone give it to him as a gift, or
did he find it on the side of the road? Did he find it in a trash can?
Yeah. Or maybe he was connected to the whole racing scene. Who knows?
Sure. There were a lot of possibilities, right, that police had to consider. Inside the pocket of his jeans was a book of matches from Grant's truck stop. So there were some clues. Now, police had to figure out what to make of these clues.
Yeah.
And there was more. The Sumter Daily item detailed the jewelry that the male victim was wearing. He wore a Bulova Accutron, yellow gold watch on his left hand. On his other hand, he wore a 14-karat gold ring with a gray-lined starstone in a tiger eye setting. Inside the band, the letters JPF had been engraved.
So he's got some gold on him.
Yeah, he's got a nice watch, a 14-karat gold ring. But, to me, it's what's engraved inside the band. The letters JPF. Just one more thing to go on. Pathologists turned to dental work as a means of identification. The male victim's teeth suggested he could be anywhere between 18 to 27 years old. It was pretty apparent that he came from an affluent background. The Florence Morning News said that he'd had complex and costly dental procedures, including root canal surgery and a partial dental restoration.
Well, yeah, you're going to need some money to have something like that done, or really good insurance.
One of the two.
Yes.
I think what it rules out is, that you're a drifter. You're, hopping trains and have been most of your life. You're not going to have that type of dentistry work done.
Right.
You have a family somewhere, most likely. The female victim was estimated to be around 18 to 20 years old, but the upper end of her age range was later increased to 25 years old. She had a slim build, was 5'5" tall, and weighed around 100 to 105 pounds. She had auburn shoulder-length hair. She had bluish-green eyes, but they were also reported to be gray or hazel. And I think eye color, to me, is sometimes mystifying.
Right.
I can look at someone and not know exactly what color their eyes are. Now, if you've got like deep water, ocean blue eyes, okay, I get that. Some of the ones are a little convoluted to me. Blue-green, hazel, brown, depending on the way the light hits them.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of all over the map for me, but
I got blue eyes, but sometimes I have aqua eyes. It just depends. Just depends.
Just depends on where the tides are.
Exactly.
At the time someone looks at them.
Yeah.
She had 2 moles on her left cheek, one on her right cheek, and one on her right calf. It was said, Gibbs, that she had extremely long natural eyelashes and pierced ears. The extent of her dental work was fillings in her back teeth, but she had no scars on her body. She had manicured fingernails and toenails, but her legs were unshaven.
Well, in the mid-70s, not very uncommon.
Well, I don't know, because I wasn't born until 73. I know you had a lot of dates in the mid-70s, so I will take your word on that one. The young woman was dressed in blue denim cutoffs with a floral print scarf as a belt, but no underwear. So, that kind of jumped out at me, Gibbs. You've got 2 individuals found dead together. They're dressed, but neither one of them was wearing underwear. Okay, I'm not saying it's a bombshell, but it did kind of jump out at me as being notable.
Well, I know you can relate to this because I know you like to be commando yourself.
I go commando from time to time. It is very freeing.
Too freeing.
Sometimes.
Well, I sit across from you, so I'm just saying it's too freeing.
Now, Gibbs, I do think that this fact that the victims weren't wearing underwear left a lot of people to theorize that there was some type of sexual motivation to the crime and that their underwear had been stolen.
But nothing ever came out that they were sexually assaulted.
The young woman wore a white cotton blouse over a pink halter top. On her feet were a pair of hot pink and lavender wedge-heeled sandals. According to the Doe Network, the young woman wore 3 sterling silver rings. They were in the style of Native American or Mexican handmade jewelry. One ring had a faceted band with red, white, and blue stones. Another had a rectangular black stone. And then the third had a large, intricate feather scroll band featuring a jade stone. Like the male victim, the young woman was white with an olive complexion. So I think, Gibbs, this led law enforcement to believe that the two were likely brother and sister, perhaps from somewhere like South America. The problem is neither of the victims had any ID or money on them. When the toxicology results came back, no drugs or alcohol were found in their system. They hadn't been smokers either. The last thing they'd eaten before they died was fruit or ice cream. Detectives suspected the pair may have purchased the fruit from a store along the way. So, I mean, these were some very detailed physical descriptions of the victims, especially the information about their distinguishing features and the man's dental work. When investigators attempted to trace the origin of the Bulova watch using the serial number, they found it had been manufactured in 1968, according to the High Point Enterprise. But they ran into a problem when they found that the company had destroyed its records, so it was impossible to trace where the watch could have been sold. But I think what was immediately apparent to authorities was that these two individuals didn't appear to be homeless, runaways, or drifters. They were both clean. They were wearing valuable jewelry, and they were both well-groomed. While the nature of the victims' relationship was uncertain, police suspected the pair had hit the road to travel around the U.S., like many young people did of their generation.
Yeah, I mean, if they're in their early 20s.
There's no better time.
Yeah.
To hit the open road.
See America, see the world.
Before you settle down, before you have, the mortgages and the kids and all the responsibilities. If you're going to do it then, or you got to wait until you're an empty nester and you get that motorhome and then, cruise all around the country.
Hit the road, hit
the open road in retirement. I remember, when I was young, high school age, just after high school, I was always envious when I heard about somebody, backpacking across Europe.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, wouldn't that be great to do that? The problem is I didn't have any money, so I was pretty much forced to work, from the time I was about 14 years old. But I was always jealous of those people that could do that.
Yeah, they just take off and go.
Sure.
Didn't worry about where their next meal was going to come from. They'd figure out, they'd find a way.
Steal a baguette in France or, have a Lady in the Tramp moment in Italy.
Yeah, okay.
But you do what you got to do.
You got a little Disney on your mind?
Sure. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive. What's one thing you'd purchase with a little extra savings? A weighted blanket, smart speaker, that new self-care trend you keep hearing about. Well, Progressive wants to make sure you're getting what you want by helping you save money on car insurance. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average. And customers can qualify for an average of 6 discounts when they sign up. Discounts like having multiple vehicles on your policy. Progressive offers outstanding coverage and award-winning claim service. Day or night, they have customer support 24/7, 365 days a year. When you need them most, they're at their best. A little off your rate each month goes a long way. Get a quote today at Progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts vary and are not available in all states and situations. Gibbs, can we talk about High Chew for a minute? When I put a piece of High Chew candy in my mouth, it's like an explosion of flavor. My favorite is the pina colada, but I love them all. And I think the biggest thing for me is that the candy tastes what it says it's going to taste like. And to me, that's a big deal. High Chew has an interesting double layer, which plays a part in its special patented flavor release technology. It's pretty cool stuff. And it has a unique chewy texture. It's not a gum. It's not a taffy. It's really just unlike other candies. I mentioned it. High Chew's flavors are true to life, unlike anything else. There's no artificial flavor taste. If the wrapper says mango, it's going to taste like mango. High Chew uses concentrated fruit juices and purees, which makes the flavors amazing. We want you to love High Chew as much as we do. So visit www.high-chew.com/win. That's hi-chew.com/WIN and enter to win an exclusive bucket full of High Chew candy and swag. While you're there, check out how you can become a member of the High Chew Chew Crew, which is an exclusive club where you receive special offers and all of the cool things. Go to highchew.com/win. In the week following the murders, the Greenwood Index Journal reported that investigators had sent the victims' fingerprints to the FBI in an attempt to identify them, but neither of their fingerprints were on file. The sheriff's office distributed sketches of the victims, detailed physical descriptions, and dental information to many of the police departments and sheriff's offices across the country in the hopes that someone would come forward.
All right, so everybody's doing the right thing. Let's get the information out. Let's see what kind of responses we can get back from the FBI, the other sheriff departments, police departments across the country. Maybe somebody will recognize these two individuals, and maybe we can identify them.
According to the DNA Doe Project, a man who lived on Locklear Road came forward. Locklear Road was a narrow frontage road between the towns of Sumter and Florence. The man told police that in the early morning hours of August 9th, while he was at home, he heard a car in the distance. He then said he heard the sound of someone getting out, followed by gunshots, and then the sound of the car speeding away. So Gibbs, I've said before, right? I hear gunshots from my house from time to time.
Right.
I've got some pretty big open fields across the street from me. There are times when people are firing guns over there, but I do get this. You hear about this finding and then you remember these specific things happening. I could see where this man would want to come forward and
Sure.
at least let police know what he heard. He's not going to know what to make of it. He's not going to know what it means, but maybe it would help the police in some way.
But I mean, some pretty distinctive sounds, right? The gunshots, the speeding car, burning off the tires and speeding off. You're going to kind of know what those noises are.
Sure. Now, do some people mistake gunfire for a car backfire? Sure, that happens. But to me, gunshots are pretty distinctive if you've been around them, if you've heard enough of them. Within weeks of the slayings, the Sumter Daily Item reported on a potential break in the case regarding the identity of their Jane Doe. A man contacted police informing them that he recognized the young woman from newspaper reports as someone he dated the year before, but was since reported as missing. So detectives traveled to Brunswick, Georgia, where this girl's parents lived, but unfortunately the photographs weren't a match. Police also received a tip that a van spotted at a garage in Florence County may have been driven by the victims, but this too was quickly eliminated. And again, this is going to happen in every case, right? You want this deluge of tips to come in.
You do want a deluge of tips coming in.
You just wanted to say deluge.
I did.
Because it's on your word of the day calendar, and I left that door open for you to use it.
I appreciate you allowing me to deluge that out there.
The more tips, the better, right? I mean, that's just common sense. Police are going to run as many of them, hopefully all of them, if they can. They're going to run them down. I think the tough part is you're going to have a lot more misses than hits. I mean, just statistically.
Yeah.
If you get 100 tips, it's possible that you strike out on all 100. But as we know, it just takes the one.
Hey, go back to the old sales day. You got to have 100 no's before you get that one yes. As you know, when you dated back in the early days.
Right. It's a numbers game.
Yeah, exactly.
And coffee is for closers.
Exactly.
As the investigation continued, law enforcement notified agencies, including Interpol and U.S. Immigration. The county coroner, Verna Moore, contacted agencies in Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, and the Mediterranean, but she continually came up empty. That jumped out at me, Gibbs. You have a county coroner from South Carolina.
Yeah.
Contacting all kinds of different agencies and countries, in South America, in the Mediterranean. My assumption is it was all based on the olive complexion.
Sure.
So you have the potential for them being from South America. You obviously also have the potential for them being from the Mediterranean, Greece, or somewhere like that. The North Carolina Daily Times News reported that the American Dental Association went as far as publishing the forensic odontology findings in the hope that a dentist out there somewhere would come forward identifying the male victim's dental work. But this too failed to yield any leads. I do think this was a very smart thing to do. We talked about it. He had some pretty complex dental work.
Yeah.
Something that, maybe a specific dentist would recognize and say, hey, that's my work, or I know who, received that work. Meanwhile, detectives were pretty sure that the letters engraved inside the male victim's ring were likely his initials. Okay. I don't think they're, really going out on a ledge there.
I don't think so either.
Pretty smart to believe that those are initials. One man came forward claiming he'd met the victims on the road in South Carolina. He told police that the couple was on their way to Florida, saying that the male victim had introduced himself as Jock. According to the Doe Network, the man claimed Jock explained he was traveling around the country, which had caused some friction with his father, who was a well-respected doctor. So, I think this lent some credence to the theory that the letters inside the ring were his initials, especially when the witness claimed he recognized the man's ring. Without formal identification, the male victim became known as Jock Doe and his companion as Jane Doe. 4 months after the murders, a trucker named George Henry was pulled over in December 1976 for drunk driving. Inside his vehicle, police found a .357 Smith & Wesson revolver with the serial number scratched off.
That's never good. The police really don't like that when you scratch off the serial numbers.
No, it's kind of a dead giveaway that you're up to no good, potentially, because, what is the purpose of scratching off the serial numbers other than you don't want that gun to be identified?
Yeah, you don't want it to be traced.
So why would you not want that if you're living within, the bounds of the law? And I think really quickly, Gibbs, police believe that, it was the same type of firearm which had killed Jock and Jane. They had to be very interested in it. The weapon was confiscated and subjected to ballistic testing. It turned out that it was the smoking gun. This was the same firearm that was used in the murders. Now, you'd think being in possession of a murder weapon would be enough to bring charges, but it was still only circumstantial. And police didn't have sufficient evidence to charge Henry with the murders. According to the Greenwood Index Journal, Henry passed a polygraph test. He told investigators that on the night of the murders, he was visiting his sick wife in the hospital, several hours away from the crime scene. But police weren't going to let up on this gun.
No, they're going to work it.
They worked on tracing the origin of the revolver. Henry stated his brother had given it to him for his birthday, and then later eventually admitted to filing the serial number off. According to the website SumterMysteryCouple.com, investigators traced the weapon back to a small South Carolina criminal gang. Unfortunately, there doesn't appear to be much information available about whether any further inquiries regarding the firearm turned up any potential leads.
So it sounds like Henry just got it as a birthday present. He chose to file the serial number off, or who knows what his reason was.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like his brother got it from maybe a disreputable source, but I don't know if there was anything illegal about it. He could have purchased it from a criminal gang, I guess.
Right.
I don't understand the filing of the serial number off, though, because, that today will catch you a serious charge. I don't know what the penalty for that was back in, the 70s. My assumption is it was illegal even back then, but I don't know how severe the penalty would have been. Now, we mentioned the book of matches that was found in Jock's jeans and that they originated from a truck stop chain. Authorities learned that the matches were only sold in Idaho, New Mexico, and Nebraska. Some reports also mention Arizona as a location where the matches were sold, but not all. According to the High Point Enterprise, after the tip about the matches was publicly released, a Nebraska man told police he may have performed repairs on a vehicle that was driven by a couple who resembled the victims. But this too proved to be a dead end. So, police are getting a lot of really good stuff. It just doesn't lead anywhere. I mean, if you look at these Gibbs on the surface, these are very promising leads.
They are.
They just didn't pan out. During the first year of the investigation, Jock and Jane's bodies were kept at a South Carolina funeral home to allow the public to be able to identify them and claim their remains. The top of the caskets was transparent. According to the Greenwood Index Journal, people from Texas, Rhode Island, even Canada contacted detectives to see if the victims could be people they knew who were missing. But despite the caskets being airtight, the decomposition process couldn't be held off forever. An entire year had passed without anyone coming forward to claim Jock or Jane. So there's two things here to me. Number one, I was surprised that they could keep these two bodies
preserved as long as they could.
Preserved for a year. Now, what doesn't surprise me is that you would have people from all over who had a missing loved one trying to figure out if Jock or Jane Doe could be that person.
Yeah.
I think any family member, any mom, dad, sister, brother who had a family member disappear would do anything in their power to try to figure out what happened to them. And that would include really keeping an eye out for stories about unidentified individuals.
Right.
And then learning the details of that story and trying to figure out if that could be their loved one. The Florence Morning News covered the church service held for Jock and Jane on August 14th, 1977, which was attended by hundreds of people from the local community. They were laid to rest at the Bethel United Methodist Church Cemetery in Oswego, South Carolina, thanks to the sheriff's office and church trustees. Their grave markers read male unknown and female unknown. But really, Gibbs, years passed without any meaningful developments. According to the Sumter Daily Item, a potential lead in March 1983 was eliminated after a young woman reported missing back in July 1976 from Lexington County was said to have resembled Jane. But it was found out that the young woman had returned home a month later. In 1995, thanks to the persistence of County Coroner Verna Moore, the double murders were featured on the iconic show Unsolved Mysteries after she made several requests.
And we know sometimes that's a big help.
Yeah, it can be a huge help in any case. Shows like Unsolved Mysteries, America's Most Wanted, they reached a pretty large audience. And so because of that, they often generated a large number of tips from viewers. But I want to go back to this Verna Moore, kind of captivated by her. She was just not going to let this case go, right? She contacted a bunch of different countries.
She did.
To try to figure out who these people were. She wouldn't let up trying to get their case aired on Unsolved Mysteries. You really have to give it up for her. Then in 2007, with advances in forensic technology, Verna requested for Jock and Jane's bodies to be exhumed to allow for further testing in an attempt to identify them. This process saw their teeth and bone samples extracted and compared to mitochondrial DNA, which was already on file around the country. If either of their mothers had ever provided DNA to the authorities for any reason, there would ideally be a match. There was no match, but the exercise did solve one mystery. Finally, there was confirmation that Jock and Jane were not related. So I think once this was discovered, it lent further weight to the theory that they were a couple. But investigators couldn't be certain of the nature of their relationship beyond confirming that the pair had been traveling together before they were killed. Verna continued to work tirelessly on the case for another 2 years until she retired in 2009. This episode is brought to you by Surfshark. Let's face it, the internet is getting more dangerous by the second. Hackers have more ways to target you. Trackers are following your every move, and malware is hiding all over the web. Well, luckily, there is a solution. You can get a VPN. It will hide your real location, making you more difficult to identify and target. But privacy and security are not all that Surfshark has to offer. If you use a VPN, you will forget about geo-restriction. You'll be able to access everything from news sources to social media apps that are unavailable to you because of your location. Just change your virtual location and access all the entertainment you want safely and securely. And you can try out Surfshark completely risk-free because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Get Surfshark VPN at surfshark.deals/TCAT. Use the promo code TCAT, TCATT, for 83% off and 3 extra months free. That's surfshark.deals/TCAT. Gibbs, you and I talk about cases that capture the attention of the public, some solved, a lot of unsolved cases.
Yeah.
Really capture people's attention. They become obsessed with trying to solve the mystery. And this case was no exception. In 2013, a South Carolina amateur sleuth named Matthew McDaniel decided to do his own deep dive into the case. According to Fox Carolina News, like many people, Matthew was baffled how not one but 2 people could be viciously murdered and remain unidentified for decades. He undertook hundreds of hours of research and analysis. This included eventually reaching out to the Sumter County Sheriff's Office, suggesting they contact the nonprofit volunteer organization, the DNA Doe Project, to help identify Jock and Jane. And thankfully, the sheriff's office was receptive to his suggestion. And in June 2019, it contacted the organization, which specializes in genetic genealogy research. According to ABC4 News, in July 2020, the organization sent Jock and Jane's DNA samples to California and Alabama for analysis. In October of that year, they released initial information about the pair's ancestry. Despite having olive complexions, both were of European heritage. Using gedmatch.com, the volunteer genealogists found possible relatives of the pair, and they provided their findings to the sheriff's office in 2021. So, Gibbs, we mentioned it right up front.
Yeah.
Right? Jock and Jane remained unidentified for almost 45 years.
It's a long time.
But in early 2021, a news report revealed startling new information. As a result of the work by the DNA Doe Project, Jock was from Pennsylvania, while ABC4 News confirmed that Jane was from Minnesota. Later in January, law enforcement called a press conference where they announced that Jock and Jane had been formally identified. They were 29-year-old James Paul Freund and 24-year-old Pamela Mae Buckley. James was born in Fitchburg, Massachusetts on September 14th, 1946, an only child to his parents, Adam and Loletta. When he was still a child, the family moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. According to Fox 43 News, as an adolescent, James, who was known as JP, attended J.P. McCaskey High School, where he played on the baseball team and graduated in 1964. The following year, the 18-year-old married his high school girlfriend, Sherilyn Albright, and the couple went on to have a daughter. In 1966, James's father, Adam, passed away at the age of 49. According to the Lancaster Intelligencer Journal, James served with the U.S. Army after graduating high school. At the time his father died, he was serving in Germany. According to WACH Fox 57 News, James filed for divorce in 1971. He was last seen on Christmas Day, 1975 in Lancaster. As investigators worked to tie as many loose ends together as possible, it emerged that James had come to own a Bulova watch because his ex-father-in-law worked for the company. After James disappeared, his family had no idea where he was. According to Lancaster Online, in 1985, the Freunds started the process of having him declared legally dead. After another attempt by his ex-wife in 1988, this was formalized. According to U.S. Social Security records, James's date of death was listed as January 1983. And this has to be incredibly tough, Gibbs, as a family, to make the decision.
Sure, yeah. To declare your child, your son, your ex-husband dead.
And it took a while, as you would expect it to, because as a family, you want to hold out hope that this person is going to come back. They're going to be found. They're going to be found alive. James's mother died in 2004 without ever knowing what had happened to her only child. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is.
Pamela Buckley was born on December 16th, 1951 in Redwood County, Minnesota, to her parents, Robert and Shirley. She attended Redwood Falls High School, where she participated in the choir and various vocal groups. According to WACH Fox 47 News, Pamela was on track to become Miss Redwood Falls in 1971. But she decided to leave Minnesota and tour the West Coast with her folk music trio called Sunlending. Now, there's not a lot known about her life during this time, but it is known that she eventually moved to Colorado, where she married a man named Gary Kennel in 1972. Pamela was last seen in December 1975 in Colorado Springs and was soon after reported missing by her family. At the time, she and Gary were still married. Gary ended up divorcing Pamela.
Well, we can only assume the marriage must have been pretty rocky before Pamela disappeared, because Gary filed for divorce and it was finalized in 1976, so only a year after she went missing.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he waited very long. Pamela's family unsuccessfully tried to track her down. There's very little information out there detailing exactly how and when James and Pamela met and how long they may have been traveling together before that fateful summer night. But it does appear, as police originally suspected, that they were hitchhiking their way around the country. Something that was clarified at the 2021 county sheriff's press conference was the details of the couple's injuries. Pamela and James had been shot 3 times, but they had not, as was previously reported, been shot in the throat. The county sheriff's office confirmed that both Pamela and James died after being shot in the back of the head. So to me, Gibbs, this revelation that they were both shot in the head, as opposed to what had been reported, early on, kind of brings to mind an execution style killing. And it's what we often think of as being shot in the head. We call it an execution style. When James and Pamela's identities were revealed at the press conference, the sheriff's office announced that they were pursuing several persons of interest, although they didn't indicate who these people were. According to WIS News 10, police also commented that they believe the murders were an isolated incident. So no doubt police uncovered some things, but there were still a lot of questions. There was still a lot unknown.
Sure there was.
According to the North Carolina Daily Times News, investigators wondered if the pair had hitched a ride with the wrong person or the wrong people, or on the other hand, had James and Pamela been driving a vehicle and picked up some hitchhikers who shot them dead on the side of the road and then drove off with their vehicle. And then I think we have to go back to George Henry, who was picked up for drunk driving months after the murders. You know, to me, Henry is a very intriguing guy. Obviously, he had the murder weapon with him. Now, he gave police an alibi. I don't know, Gibbs. I really couldn't find anywhere if it was certified, whether it was verified or not, or verifiable, this alibi.
Right.
The problem is investigators can't make any further inquiries with Henry because he passed away in 1982. But I don't know how you take this guy off the table. Anyone who is in possession of the murder weapon has to be a pretty serious person of interest.
He's got to be relevant, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do to him now, obviously, even if, you uncovered some additional information. We've seen a lot of cases where alibis were thought to be pretty airtight, turned out that they weren't even true. We just don't know with this guy. One infamous name that was thrown into the mix was notorious serial killer Henry Lee Lucas. Why does it seem like we talk about Henry Lee Lucas on every episode?
I don't know.
Somehow he gets involved or his name gets brought up.
It does pop up a lot, doesn't it?
It does, especially maybe it's because anytime somebody starts confessing to a large number of crimes, you can't help but bring in Henry Lee Lucas.
Well, he would throw his own name in anyway.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If we were talking to him right now, he'd say, yeah, I probably did that one. Speculation arose around Lucas after he told police that he was in South Carolina when the murders occurred. But according to the Greenwood Index Journal, police doubted he could be responsible. I mean, we've talked about him at length, right? This was a guy who had a demonstrated pattern of admitting to murders that he didn't commit, right? It was proven that he confessed to murders that he didn't commit. And there was no compelling evidence linking him to Pamela or James's murder. Lucas later confessed to two other murders in Sumter County, one in 1975 and the other in 1983. But police didn't find any links between, these claims, these deaths, and the deaths of Pamela and James. Lucas died in prison in 2001. For me, when it comes to Henry Lee Lucas, I have a hard time with him just because he's confessed to everything.
Right.
Or he did while he was alive. So much of them have been proven to be incorrect.
Right.
Like it's literally been proven that he couldn't have done
what he said he did.
What he said he did. I don't know that it's been proven that he couldn't have killed Pamela and James. I think what's been reported is that police doubt that he could be responsible. So
right.
I think you got to take it that way. As we mentioned, genealogy records show that the divorce between Pamela and her estranged husband, Gary, was finalized in 1976. Gary later remarried and passed away in 2018. In a lot of cases, it's often the spouse of a person who is responsible for their death. We know that. We see that in tons of cases. But in the research on this case, there's really nothing to suggest that Gary was involved or that he was considered a suspect at any point. At the press conference announcing the identification of James and Pam, law enforcement invited Matthew McDaniel to speak. Remember, he's the guy who contacted law enforcement, encouraged them to pursue genetic genealogy testing. Matthew has an idea of who may be responsible and has passed his information and research on to investigators. One of the theories posted on SumterMysteryCouple.com is that Pamela and James's murders were drug related. According to Lancaster Online, Matthew has even suggested that James may have been the killer's primary target and Pamela was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to the Sumter Daily Item, at the time of the murders, the I-95 corridor where Pamela and James were found was known as the main route for transporting cocaine from New York City to Miami. So I think when you consider the execution style of the murders, that does help support the theory that the killings may have been targeted. Because the investigation has been reopened, we're not really privy to all the details. The other thing that I think people point to, Gibbs, around this theory is, it being known that at the very least, James was down in Florida, right? We mentioned Sebring. We mentioned the races. Okay. Could he have been in Miami at one point, making his way up to New York?
Yeah.
He meets up with Pamela. We don't know.
It's a possibility.
Until it's ruled out, right? I think everything is on the table. Everything is a possibility until it is ruled out conclusively. And I also think that is the draw to cases like this that are unsolved, that have a great deal of mystery surrounding them, is that there are angles, there are theories to pursue, things to look into. And a lot of people find that extremely fascinating. I mean, there's no doubt the identification of James and Pamela has reinvigorated the investigation. We said it early on. How do you really get the investigation started when you don't even know who these people are? Okay, well, now we do. We know who they are. So I think that in and of itself kind of, kick-started the investigation. I think the questions remain. There are hurdles that law enforcement has to overcome, questions that they have to answer. What really was the nature of the relationship between James and Pamela? I don't think it's ever been confirmed where they met,
right? How
they met, how long they had been together before the murders occurred. But if you think about it, there have been some very recent developments, right, in this case. And when you have that in these really old unsolved cases, it brings new hope. Everything kind of gets reinvigorated because you got to think about it. If these two individuals can be identified after, 45 years or so, well, then there's much better hope in identifying the killer or killers.
Sure, there is.
Now, is the killer or killer still going to be alive? That's a big question.
Sure.
Even if it was a youngish killer or a group of killers, let's say in their mid-20s, by now they'd be 70 some years old.
Right. Yeah.
So, obviously every year that goes by, there's a chance that they may no longer be alive.
But still to be able to identify them.
That would, even if the perpetrator or perpetrators were all deceased.
Yeah.
It would be huge to identify who they were.
Yeah.
And give some kind of finality to this case. You and I talked about on our weekly Patreon episode, the case of the Durham family murders.
Right.
And that went back probably a similar amount of time, maybe even longer. They just recently kind of announced that they believe they know who the killers are. So, that's the thing. You can never say never on these types of cases because some of these older cases are being solved left and right. And it's very exciting.
It is. It really is.
If you have any information on the murders of Pamela Buckley and James Freund, you can contact the Sumter County Sheriff's Office at 803-436-2000, or you can provide an anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers at 888-274-6372. But that's it, Gibbs, for our case on the unsolved murders of the Sumter County Does, Pamela Buckley and James Freund. Amazing that, they were identified after so many years.
Sure.
It would be even more amazing if law enforcement can solve the murders.
Hope for the best.
Yeah, you got to keep the hope alive. And it's also, to me, a very positive sign to see law enforcement still working these cases, finding things out. I get encouraged when, we talk about some of these older unsolved cases and things are still coming out and being worked on, and they just haven't given up on them. When a tip comes along, they work it, and hopefully it leads to something. So it's encouraging. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, this is Dawn from Massachusetts. I'm a mail carrier. Just wanted to say thank you guys for all the awesome shows and great content, period. Absolutely love you guys. I think you're great. And you would be blown away if you ever went to a postal page to see how many mail carriers are true crime fanatics. Okay, thanks. Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
I think mail carriers and truckers, man, we have so many listeners in those two professions.
We do.
Now, first of all, they're in a vehicle for long periods of time, depending on what kind of mail carrier you are.
That's true.
Because, I don't like to flaunt it, but I was a mail carrier at one time.
Yes, you were.
For a summer.
Yeah.
But, for me, I drove the truck and then got out and had to walk the route. Now, I could have used a Walkman, but, nowadays you would put your earbuds in, maybe, if you're allowed to. But there still are, some mail carriers who deliver everything from the truck, so they could just be blasting it the whole time.
The whole time, yeah.
Hey guys, this is Jada from Canada again. So I just listened to your Kyron Harmon, the newest unsolved one about the little boy that's missing. I'd never heard this one before. It was interesting, but I actually had to go back and re-listen to the beginning again, because at the very beginning you say Terry dropped him off at school and dropped off his jacket and backpack at the school. And then she takes a picture of him in front of his science fair thing. But then later on you say that same day she had his jacket and backpack and she washed them. So how did she get his jacket and backpack? You guys are the best, as usual. I will listen to you guys all the time. You're my favorite podcast for sure. I'm Team Mike. I love you both. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yeah, I think, Gibbs, that is one of the things that people really look at and say, boy, that does not look good for Terry.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't.
Now, I know the washing of the jacket and the backpack, I think that came from a book called Boy Missing by author Rebecca Morris. We said that. But if it's true, it is really kind of damning type evidence. You'd have to say that, or it would make everyone think that, okay, how'd she get that? And why would she feel the need to wash it all? Right? I think we talked about all that, but it is something that kind of jumps out.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Becky from Alabama, and I was just calling to say I love both of the podcasts, and I'm catching up on all of them, but I just listened to the one on Hendrik Effect, and I love that one. I was just thinking that y'all didn't mention the part that actually scared me the most when there was a tractor repairman or some sort of repairman who came to the farm, and apparently the murderer was still there because the dog was tied up in the barn when he first got there, and then was actually tied up even closer to him at the farmhouse door before he left, and that always has just freaked me out. And I don't know if that's a common fact or what. I wasn't sure why y'all didn't mention that part. But I love the shows, and I'm Team Mike. I love both of y'all. Keep up the good work and keep your own time ticking. Thank you.
All right. Really appreciate the voicemail. That one's been a while, Gibbs, so I don't remember the specifics quite as well as the one we did just last week. I will say this. There are times when you and I are researching where we find a piece of information.
Right.
But we can't find it anywhere else, and so we don't use it.
Right.
And so, maybe you heard that somewhere or read it. Now, it's possible that it's a fact and we just missed it. That's absolutely possible. But I know there are times where we purposefully leave things out because we just can't corroborate them. We can't find them in more than one place. So we just don't know the validity of a statement.
Good point.
Yeah. So it could be that, or it could just be that we missed it. All right, buddy. That's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.